Question 1. Analysis of how to best optimize internal claims processing workflows at Allianz SC, considering the need to enhance efficiency while strictly adhering to all applicable financial services regulations and internal compliance policies. What is the most prudent approach? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current regulations and internal compliance frameworks, followed by a pilot program of proposed optimizations with rigorous testing and validation against compliance benchmarks before a full rollout. Option B. Immediately deploy a new automated claims management system, assuming existing compliance controls will automatically adapt to the new technology. Option C. Implement process changes based on industry best practices observed at other financial institutions, without a specific assessment of their applicability to Allianz SC's unique regulatory obligations. Option D. Prioritize automation of high-volume, low-complexity claims to achieve immediate cost savings, deferring a detailed compliance review until after the system is operational. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current regulations and internal compliance frameworks, followed by a pilot program of proposed optimizations with rigorous testing and validation against compliance benchmarks before a full rollout. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization within a regulated financial services environment like Allianz SC. The core difficulty lies in balancing the drive for efficiency gains with the imperative to maintain compliance with stringent regulatory requirements. Introducing new technologies or streamlining workflows can inadvertently create new risks or bypass existing control mechanisms, potentially leading to regulatory breaches, financial losses, or reputational damage. Therefore, any process optimization initiative must be approached with meticulous attention to detail, a thorough understanding of the existing regulatory landscape, and a proactive risk assessment framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased implementation with robust testing and validation against regulatory requirements. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that any changes are not only efficient but also compliant and secure. Specifically, it prioritizes understanding the current regulatory framework, e.g., relevant Allianz SC internal policies, industry standards, and any applicable financial services regulations in the jurisdictions where Allianz SC operates, before proposing changes. The subsequent pilot testing and validation phases are crucial for identifying and mitigating potential compliance gaps or operational risks before a full-scale rollout. This iterative and controlled approach minimizes disruption and ensures that the optimized process adheres to all legal and ethical obligations, thereby safeguarding the company and its stakeholders. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing a new, unproven technology without a thorough assessment of its impact on existing compliance controls. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it bypasses the due diligence required to ensure that the new technology does not violate data privacy regulations, anti-money laundering, AML requirements, or other operational risk mandates. Demonstrates a disregard for the principle of compliance by design. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on cost reduction through automation without considering the potential for increased operational risk or the need for updated training for staff. This is professionally unacceptable as it prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term operational stability and regulatory adherence. It can lead to errors, misinterpretations of regulation, and ultimately, noncompliance, which carries severe penalties. A third incorrect approach is to assume that existing controls are sufficient for any new process without explicit verification. This is a failure of proactive risk management and regulatory due diligence. It relies on a passive approach to compliance, which is insufficient in a dynamic regulatory environment. The assumption that what worked before will work now is a dangerous fallacy that can lead to overlooking critical control weaknesses introduced by process changes. Professional reasoning. Professionals in process optimization within regulated industries must adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. The decision-making process should involve 1. Comprehensive understanding of the current regulatory environment and internal policies. 2. Thorough risk assessment of proposed changes, identifying potential compliance and operational risks. 3. Phased implementation with rigorous testing and validation against defined compliance metrics. 4. continuous monitoring and review of the optimized process to ensure ongoing adherence to regulations. 5. Stakeholder engagement, including compliance and legal departments, throughout the optimization lifecycle. Question 2. Process analysis reveals a proposal from a significant policyholder group requesting a specific, immediate adjustment to their policy terms that, while offering them a short-term financial benefit, could potentially strain the company's liquidity reserves and impact its ability to meet future claims for other policyholder segments. What is the most prudent course of action for the Allianz SE representative? Option A. Escalate the request to senior management without conducting an initial assessment of its feasibility or impact. Option B. Immediately approve the policyholder group's request to maintain positive stakeholder relations and demonstrate responsiveness. Option C. Inform the policyholder group that their request cannot be accommodated due to potential negative impacts on other policyholders. Option D. Initiate a thorough review of the proposal's long-term financial implications and regulatory compliance, consulting with relevant internal departments before making a decision. The correct answer is D. Initiate a thorough review of the proposal's long-term financial implications and regulatory compliance, consulting with relevant internal departments before making a decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of a specific stakeholder group with the broader, long-term solvency and regulatory compliance of the insurance company. The challenge lies in discerning when a stakeholder's request, while seemingly beneficial in the short term, could inadvertently create systemic risks or violate the principles of fair treatment and prudent management expected by regulators. Careful judgment is required to avoid prioritizing one stakeholder's needs to the detriment of others or the company's overall stability. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Allianz SE hiring assessment test's implied regulatory framework, which would likely emphasize solvency, fair treatment of all policyholders, and responsible financial management. By seeking clarification and considering the broader implications, the professional demonstrates a commitment to acting in the best interests of the company and all its stakeholders, aligning with regulatory expectations for sound business conduct and risk management. This proactive stance ensures that decisions are informed by a comprehensive understanding of potential consequences and regulatory boundaries. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate financial gain for the specific stakeholder group would be professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to uphold the fiduciary duty owed to all policyholders and the company as a whole. It could lead to regulatory scrutiny for potentially engaging in practices that undermine the insurer's financial stability or create an unfair advantage for one group over others. Such an approach would likely contravene principles of equitable treatment and prudent risk management, which are cornerstones of insurance regulation. Another incorrect approach, which involves unilaterally approving the request without further investigation, would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential downstream impacts on the company's financial health and its ability to meet future obligations to all policyholders. It could be interpreted as a failure to manage risks effectively and could expose the company to penalties for non-compliance with solvency requirements or other prudential regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the request. Clearly identify the stakeholder's objective and the proposed action. 2. Assess the impact. Evaluate the potential financial, operational, and reputational consequences of the request on the company and all stakeholder groups. 3. Consult relevant policies and regulations. Review internal policies, procedures, and applicable regulatory guidelines to determine compliance. 4. Seek expert advice. If necessary, consult with legal, compliance, or actuarial departments to gain a comprehensive understanding of the implications. 5. Consider long-term sustainability. Prioritize decisions that support the long-term solvency and stability of the company. 6. Communicate transparently. Engage in open communication with relevant stakeholders, explaining the rationale behind decisions, especially when requests cannot be fully accommodated. Question 3. Quality control measures reveal that financial advisor, when presenting a complex investment product to a client, primarily focused on highlighting the potential upside and quickly glossed over the detailed risk disclosures, assuming the client would not fully understand them. The client, however, expressed a desire for a product that offered capital preservation above all else, a point the advisor did not deeply probe. Which of the following represents the most appropriate professional response in this situation? Option A. The advisor should pause the sales process, re-explain the product's risks and benefits in simpler terms, and then explore the client's underlying motivations for prioritizing capital preservation, ensuring the product genuinely aligns with their stated objectives and risk tolerance before proceeding. Option B. The advisor should dismiss the client's capital preservation preference as secondary to the product's growth potential, emphasizing the advisor's expertise in maximizing returns. Option C. The advisor should proceed with the sale as the client expressed interest, assuming the client understands the implications of their choice and that the advisor has fulfilled their duty by presenting the product. Option D. The advisor should present a simplified summary of the product, omitting detailed risk information to avoid overwhelming the client, and proceed with the sale based on the client's initial interest. The correct answer is A. The advisor should pause the sales process, re-explain the product's risks and benefits in simpler terms, and then explore the client's underlying motivations for prioritizing capital preservation, ensuring the product genuinely aligns with their stated objectives and risk tolerance before proceeding. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's stated preferences and the advisor's fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest, particularly when those preferences might lead to suboptimal outcomes or increased risk. The advisor must navigate this delicate balance while adhering to regulatory requirements designed to protect consumers and ensure fair treatment. The challenge lies in effectively communicating complex financial concepts and potential risks to a client who may not fully grasp them, without being dismissive or patronizing. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing the client's understanding and long-term financial well-being. It involves a thorough explanation of the product's features, benefits, risks, and costs, tailored to the client's individual circumstances and risk tolerance. This aligns with regulatory obligations to provide clear, fair, and not misleading information, and to ensure suitability of advice. By actively seeking to understand the client's underlying motivations and addressing any misconceptions, the advisor fulfills their duty of care and builds trust, which is paramount in financial advisory relationships. This proactive and client-centric approach is a cornerstone of ethical financial conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach fails by solely focusing on the client's immediate request without adequately exploring the underlying reasons or potential consequences. This could lead to a misaligned product recommendation that does not truly serve the client's best interests, potentially violating suitability rules and the duty to act in good faith. It prioritizes transactional ease over client welfare. Another incorrect approach involves dismissing the client's concerns or preferences without proper investigation. This is unprofessional and can lead to a breakdown in trust. Ethically, it fails to respect the client's autonomy and right to make informed decisions, even if those decisions are not what the advisor would personally recommend. It also risks overlooking crucial information that might influence the suitability of a product. A third incorrect approach might involve oversimplifying the product's risks to appease the client or secure a sale. This is a direct violation of regulatory requirements for transparency and fair dealing. Misrepresenting or downplaying risks is unethical and can expose both the client and the firm to significant harm and regulatory sanctions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric decision-making framework. This involves 1. Active listening, truly understanding the client's needs, goals, and concerns. 2. Fiduciary duty, always acting in the client's best interest, even if it means challenging their initial requests. 3. Transparency and education, clearly explaining all relevant information, including risks and costs, in an understandable manner. 4. Suitability assessment, ensuring that any recommendation aligns with the client's risk tolerance, financial situation, and objectives. 5. Documentation, maintaining thorough records of all discussions and decisions. Question 4. Research into the regulatory framework governing Allianz SE's operations in its primary European markets. What is the most appropriate stakeholder-centric approach when a long-term policyholder requests immediate access to a significant portion of their policy's value due to unforeseen financial difficulties, considering both the policyholder's immediate needs and the insurer's long-term solvency obligations. Option A. Offer a partial surrender of the policy, providing a portion of the surrender value while allowing the remainder of the policy to continue in force, with a clear explanation of the impact on future benefits. Option B. Offer a policy loan against the surrender value, ensuring the loan terms are transparent and compliant with all applicable consumer protection and solvency regulations, while also clearly explaining the implications for the policy's future growth and death benefit. Option C. Advise the policyholder that no funds can be accessed until the policy matures, as the company's liquidity is prioritized to ensure future claim payments. Option D. Immediately process a full policy surrender, providing the entire surrender value to the policyholder without delay to address their urgent financial needs. The correct answer is B. Offer a policy loan against the surrender value, ensuring the loan terms are transparent and compliant with all applicable consumer protection and solvency regulations, while also clearly explaining the implications for the policy's future growth and death benefit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the immediate financial needs of a policyholder with the long-term solvency and regulatory obligations of Allianz SE. The core tension lies between providing prompt customer service and ensuring the company's ability to meet future claims, a critical aspect of financial services regulation. The pressure to act quickly, coupled with the potential for reputational damage if the policyholder is dissatisfied, requires careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the policy's terms and conditions, coupled with an understanding of the relevant regulatory requirements for policy surrenders and loan provisions. This aligns with the principles of fair treatment of customers, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing insurance companies. Specifically, it ensures that the policyholder is fully informed of all options and their consequences, and that any action taken is compliant with solvency regulations and consumer protection laws. This approach upholds the company's fiduciary duty to its policyholders and its responsibility to maintain financial stability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately grant the full surrender value without considering the policy's terms or potential penalties. This fails to adhere to contractual obligations and could lead to a financial loss for the policyholder if they are unaware of surrender charges or reduced benefits. It also potentially violates regulations that require insurers to act in the best interests of their customers and provide accurate information. Another incorrect approach would be to refuse the request outright, citing only the company's internal liquidity concerns, without exploring alternative solutions like policy loans. This demonstrates a lack of customer centricity and could breach regulatory expectations regarding the provision of reasonable options to policyholders facing financial hardship. It may also contravene consumer protection laws that mandate insurers to offer viable alternatives where appropriate. A third incorrect approach would be to offer a loan that significantly exceeds the policy's cash value or is structured in a way that is predatory. This would violate regulations designed to protect consumers from unfair lending practices and could jeopardize the policy's future value, ultimately harming the policyholder and potentially leading to regulatory sanctions for the insurer. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes understanding the customer's needs, thoroughly reviewing contractual terms, and rigorously applying relevant regulatory guidelines. This involves a multifaceted assessment, considering both the immediate request and the broader implications for the policyholder and the company. When faced with such situations, professionals should always 1. Understand the customer's situation and stated needs. 2. Review the specific policy contract and all associated terms and conditions. 3. Identify and apply all relevant regulatory requirements and guidelines pertaining to policy surrenders, loans, and customer treatment. 4. Explore all available options that are compliant with both the contract and regulations and present these clearly to the customer. 5. Document the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen course of action. Question 5. The efficiency study reveals significant variations in the average claim processing times across Allianz SE's European subsidiaries, with some offices consistently outperforming others. Considering the diverse regulatory landscapes and operational structures within these subsidiaries, what is the most appropriate next step for Allianz SE's management to address this disparity? Option A. Implement a standardized, global claim processing system across all European subsidiaries immediately to ensure uniformity and eliminate processing time discrepancies. Option B. Instruct the underperforming subsidiaries to adopt the best practices of the top-performing offices without further investigation, assuming the latter have superior operational models. Option C. Defer any action until a broader, pan-European regulatory harmonization initiative is completed, as current differences in local laws may explain the variations. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the claim processing workflows in each subsidiary, involving local operational teams and compliance officers, to identify specific bottlenecks and regulatory adherence issues contributing to the variations. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive review of the claim processing workflows in each subsidiary, involving local operational teams and compliance officers, to identify specific bottlenecks and regulatory adherence issues contributing to the variations. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant discrepancy in the processing times for customer claims across different Allianz SE regional offices. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts customer satisfaction, operational costs, and potentially regulatory compliance. The need for a consistent and fair customer experience across all jurisdictions where Allianz operates necessitates a thorough investigation and a standardized approach to resolving such discrepancies. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for efficiency with the imperative to maintain service quality and adhere to diverse local regulatory requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a data-driven, root cause analysis that considers both operational and regulatory factors. By engaging with regional stakeholders and seeking to understand the underlying reasons for the variations, Allianz can develop targeted and sustainable solutions. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and customer centricity, ensuring that the company acts in the best interests of its policyholders while remaining compliant with all applicable laws and regulations. This proactive and collaborative method fosters trust and accountability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on imposing a uniform, top-down solution without understanding regional nuances would fail to address the root causes and could lead to unintended negative consequences, such as decreased morale in underperforming offices or the creation of new inefficiencies. This would be a regulatory failure if it inadvertently leads to non-compliance with local service-level agreements or customer protection rules. Another incorrect approach that dismisses the findings due to the complexity of cross-jurisdictional operations would be an ethical failure, as it neglects the company's responsibility to provide a consistent and high-quality service to all its customers, regardless of their location. Ignoring such discrepancies also poses a reputational risk. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with acknowledging the problem and its potential impact. This should be followed by a structured investigation that involves gathering data, identifying potential causes, and consulting with relevant stakeholders. The next step is to evaluate potential solutions based on their feasibility, effectiveness, and compliance with all applicable regulations. Finally, the chosen solution should be implemented, monitored, and adjusted as necessary, ensuring continuous improvement and adherence to both internal policies and external regulatory mandates. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates that a long-standing client, who has been investing with Allianz SE for over a decade, is requesting to liquidate their entire investment portfolio immediately to cover an unexpected personal expense. While the client expresses urgency, the representative notes that such a withdrawal would incur substantial surrender charges and significantly reduce the potential for future capital appreciation, which the current portfolio is structured to achieve. The representative is aware that the client's stated expense is significant, but also that the client has other, less detrimental, options available that would not involve liquidating their long-term investments. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Allianz SE representative in this situation? Option A. Conduct a detailed discussion with the client to fully explain the financial implications of an immediate withdrawal, including surrender charges, tax consequences, and the loss of future growth potential. Explore the client's underlying needs and present alternative solutions, such as a partial withdrawal, a loan against the policy if applicable, or other financial strategies that might better preserve their long-term investment goals while addressing their immediate need. Option B. Downplay the significance of the surrender charges and potential loss of future growth, emphasizing that the client will have access to the funds they need for their personal expense. Option C. Advise the client that immediate liquidation is not in their best interest and refuse to process the request, suggesting they reconsider their financial priorities. Option D. Immediately process the client's request for full liquidation of the investment portfolio to ensure the client has access to the funds as quickly as possible, as their urgency is paramount. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed discussion with the client to fully explain the financial implications of an immediate withdrawal, including surrender charges, tax consequences, and the loss of future growth potential. Explore the client's underlying needs and present alternative solutions, such as a partial withdrawal, a loan against the policy if applicable, or other financial strategies that might better preserve their long-term investment goals while addressing their immediate need. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate financial needs and the long-term fiduciary duty owed by an Allianz SE representative. The client's request for early withdrawal, while understandable from their perspective, could lead to significant financial detriment for them due to surrender charges and potential loss of future investment growth. Representative must navigate this by balancing empathy with professional responsibility, ensuring the client is fully informed of all consequences. The challenge lies in delivering this information in a way that empowers the client to make a decision aligned with their best interests, rather than simply acceding to their immediate request. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, client-centric discussion that prioritizes education and informed consent. This aligns with the principles of client care and suitability, fundamental to financial advisory regulations. Specifically, under the Allianz SE framework and relevant UK financial conduct regulations, e.g., FCA Handbook Cobb's Conduct of Business Sourcebook, representatives have a duty to act honestly, fairly, and professionally in accordance with the best interests of their client. This includes providing clear, fair, and not misleading information about the implications of financial decisions, explaining surrender charges, tax implications, and the potential loss of future returns demonstrates adherence to these principles. Offering alternative solutions, such as a loan against the policy or a partial withdrawal if permissible and less detrimental, further exemplifies acting in the client's best interest. This approach ensures the client understands the trade-offs and can make a decision that is both informed and aligned with their long-term financial well-being, thereby upholding regulatory and ethical standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately processing the withdrawal request without a detailed discussion of the consequences. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement of acting in the client's best interests and providing suitable advice. It prioritizes administrative ease over client welfare, potentially leading to significant financial harm for the client due to surrender penalties and lost growth. This could be considered a breach of conduct rules requiring fair treatment of customers. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without exploring the underlying reasons or offering any alternatives. While the representative may believe it's not in the client's best interest, a complete refusal without explanation or exploration of options can damage the client relationship and may not fully address the client's immediate needs, even if those needs are poorly articulated. This approach lacks the empathy and problem-solving expected of a professional advisor. A third incorrect approach is to downplay the negative consequences of the withdrawal, focusing only on the immediate availability of funds. This is misleading and violates the principle of providing clear, fair, and not misleading information. It creates a false sense of security for the client and fails to equip them with the necessary knowledge to make a truly informed decision, potentially leading to regret and complaints. This directly contravenes regulatory expectations for transparency. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process when faced with client requests that may not be in their best long-term interest. This process should involve 1. Active listening and understanding. Fully comprehend the client's situation, needs, and the reasons behind their request. 2. Fiduciary duty assessment. Evaluate the request against the firm's fiduciary obligations and regulatory requirements, particularly concerning suitability and client best interests. 3. Comprehensive information disclosure. Clearly and transparently explain all potential consequences, both positive and negative, of the proposed action. Using plain language. 4. Alternative solutions exploration. Proactively identify and present alternative strategies that might better meet the client's needs while mitigating negative impacts. 5. Empowered decision-making. Guide the client to make an informed decision, ensuring they understand the trade-offs involved. 6. Documentation. Meticulously record the discussion, advice provided, and the client's final decision. Question 7. Which approach would be most appropriate for an Allianz SE financial advisor when a long-term client expresses a strong preference for capital preservation, but internal firm incentives are pushing for the sale of higher commission, growth-oriented products? Option A. Recommend a diversified portfolio of low-risk, capital-preserving investments that align with the client's stated objectives, even if these products offer lower commissions. Option B. Suggest a balanced portfolio that includes some growth-oriented products, emphasizing the potential for higher returns to offset the client's risk aversion. Option C. Prioritize recommending products that offer higher commissions to meet internal sales targets while highlighting the potential for future growth. Option D. Focus on explaining the benefits of the higher commission products and their historical performance, downplaying the client's stated preference for capital preservation. The correct answer is A. Recommend a diversified portfolio of low-risk, capital-preserving investments that align with the client's stated objectives, even if these products offer lower commissions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a financial advisor at Allianz SE must navigate conflicting stakeholder interests, specifically between a long-term client's desire for capital preservation and the firm's internal push for higher commission products. The advisor's duty of care and fiduciary responsibility to the client are paramount, yet they are also influenced by internal sales targets and potential incentives. Balancing these pressures requires a deep understanding of regulatory obligations, ethical principles, and client-centric decision-making. The challenge lies in ensuring that the client's best interests are not compromised by internal pressures or the advisor's own potential biases. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the client's stated objectives and risk tolerance above all else. This aligns with the fundamental principles of financial advisory conduct, which mandate acting in the client's best interest. For Allianz SE, operating within the regulatory framework of its primary jurisdictions, e.g., Germany's BaFin regulations, or equivalent EU directives like MiFID Roman II. This means conducting a thorough suitability assessment. The advisor must recommend products that are appropriate for the client's financial situation, investment objectives, capital preservation, and risk appetite. This approach upholds the fiduciary duty, fosters client trust, and mitigates regulatory risk by adhering to suitability and appropriateness rules. It demonstrates professional integrity by resisting internal pressures that could lead to mis-selling or unsuitable recommendations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Recommending a higher commission product solely because it meets internal sales targets, despite the client's explicit preference for capital preservation, represents a clear breach of the duty of care and suitability requirements. This would be a regulatory failure, potentially violating rules against mis-selling and conflicts of interest. Ethically, it prioritizes the advisor's or firm's financial gain over the client's well-being. Suggesting a product that is technically suitable but significantly more complex or higher risk than necessary, with the implicit aim of generating higher fees or commissions, also constitutes a failure. While not an outright mis-selling, it demonstrates a lack of transparency and a failure to act with the utmost integrity in the client's best interest. This could be viewed as a violation of principles of proportionality and client centricity embedded in financial regulations. Focusing exclusively on the potential for higher returns without adequately addressing the client's stated need for capital preservation would be another incorrect approach. This ignores a critical component of the client's stated objectives and risk profile, leading to a recommendation that is not fully aligned with their needs. It risks exposing the client to undue volatility and potential capital loss, contrary to their explicit wishes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-first decision-making framework. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding and documenting the client's objectives, risk tolerance, and financial situation. 2. Identifying all available product options that meet these criteria. 3. Evaluating each option based on its suitability for the client, considering not only potential returns, but also risks, costs, and alignment with stated goals. 4. Transparently discussing the pros and cons of suitable options with the client, ensuring they understand the implications. 5. Making a recommendation that is demonstrably in the client's best interest, even if it means foregoing higher commissions or meeting internal sales targets. 6. Documenting the entire process, including the rationale for the final recommendation, to ensure accountability and compliance. Question 8. The review process indicates that a senior executive at Allianz SE has recently acquired a significant personal investment in a publicly traded company that is a direct competitor in a key market segment. The executive has not yet disclosed this investment to Allianz SE's compliance department. Considering the potential implications for corporate governance and ethical conduct, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the executive? Option A. Divest the personal investment immediately without informing Allianz SE to avoid any perceived conflict. Option B. Wait to see if any specific decisions arise that might be influenced by the investment before considering disclosure. Option C. Continue to perform all executive duties as usual, assuming personal investments do not inherently impact professional responsibilities unless explicitly prohibited. Option D. Immediately disclose the personal investment to the Allianz SE Compliance Department and seek guidance on managing any potential conflicts of interest. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the personal investment to the Allianz SE Compliance Department and seek guidance on managing any potential conflicts of interest. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest arising from a senior executive's personal investment in a competitor's company. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the executive's personal financial interests with their fiduciary duties to Allianz SE. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity, preventing the misuse of confidential information, and ensuring that decisions made by the executive are solely in the best interest of Allianz SE, not influenced by their personal stake in a rival. Careful judgment is required to assess the materiality of the conflict and implement appropriate mitigation strategies. The correct approach, which involves immediate disclosure of the personal investment to the relevant compliance department and adherence to any prescribed mitigation measures, such as recusal from specific decision-making processes, represents best professional practice. This aligns with Allianz SE's internal code of conduct and broader regulatory expectations for corporate governance and ethical conduct, which mandate transparency and the proactive management of conflicts of interest. By disclosing and seeking guidance, the executive demonstrates integrity and a commitment to upholding their responsibilities, thereby safeguarding Allianz SE's reputation and operational integrity. An incorrect approach, such as downplaying the significance of the investment or failing to disclose it altogether, constitutes a serious regulatory and ethical failure. This behavior breaches the duty of loyalty owed to Allianz SE and can lead to a loss of trust, potential legal repercussions, and reputational damage for both the executive and the company. It also creates an environment where confidential information could be inadvertently or intentionally compromised, impacting Allianz SE's competitive position. Another incorrect approach, such as continuing to participate in decisions that directly affect the competitor without any disclosure or recusal, is a clear violation of fiduciary duties and ethical standards, as it prioritizes personal gain over the company's interests. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest. This involves a thorough understanding of personal financial dealings and their potential intersection with professional responsibilities. Upon identification, the next step is immediate and transparent disclosure to the appropriate internal authority, e.g., compliance, legal, or direct supervisor. This disclosure should be followed by a collaborative assessment of the conflict's severity and the development of a mutually agreed-upon plan to manage or mitigate it. This plan might include recusal from specific meetings or decisions, divestment of the conflicting interest, or other appropriate measures. Throughout this process, maintaining open communication and adhering strictly to established policies and ethical guidelines are paramount. Question 9. The analysis reveals that a financial advisor at Allianz SE is considering recommending a new, high-commission investment product to a client. While the product offers potentially higher returns, it also carries a more complex fee structure and a higher risk profile than the client's current holdings. The client has expressed a preference for stable, lower-risk investments. The advisor's performance bonus is significantly influenced by the sale of new, higher-margin products. Which course of action best upholds the advisor's professional and regulatory obligations? Option A. Recommend the new product, highlighting its potential for higher returns and explaining the fee structure, while also acknowledging the client's preference for lower risk and suggesting a smaller allocation to the new product. Option B. Recommend the new product, emphasizing its potential for higher returns and the advisor's bonus incentive, and advising the client that this is the best way to maximize their investment growth. Option C. Recommend the new product, focusing solely on its potential for higher returns and downplaying the associated risks and complex fee structure to ensure the client feels confident in the recommendation. Option D. Decline to recommend the new product and instead present a range of suitable, lower-risk investment options that align with the client's stated preferences and risk tolerance, even if these products offer lower commissions. The correct answer is A. Recommend the new product, highlighting its potential for higher returns and explaining the fee structure, while also acknowledging the client's preference for lower risk and suggesting a smaller allocation to the new product. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a financial advisor, acting on behalf of Allianz SC, is presented with conflicting stakeholder interests regarding a complex investment product. The challenge lies in balancing the fiduciary duty to the client with the potential for higher commission or bonus structures tied to the sale of this specific product. This situation demands careful judgment to ensure that client best interests are paramount, even when faced with incentives that might suggest otherwise. The regulatory framework for financial advice in the UK, governed by the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, emphasizes principles of treating customers fairly (TCF) and acting with integrity, skill, care, and diligence. The correct approach involves prioritizing the client's financial objectives, risk tolerance, and overall suitability of the product. This aligns with the FCA's principles and the SISI Code of Conduct, which mandate that advisors must act in the best interests of their clients at all times. Transparency about all associated costs, fees, and potential conflicts of interest is crucial. This approach upholds the advisor's fiduciary duty and builds long-term trust, which is essential for sustainable business practices and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach would be to push the product solely based on its commission structure, without a thorough assessment of its suitability for the client. This would violate the FCA's TCF principle and the SISI ethical standards by prioritizing personal gain over client welfare. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay or omit information about the product's risks or higher fees, which constitutes a failure of integrity and transparency, leading to potential misrepresentation and regulatory breaches. Failing to adequately document the rationale for recommending the product, especially if it deviates from simpler, lower-cost alternatives, also represents a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the client's needs and circumstances. This should be followed by a rigorous evaluation of all available product options, considering their suitability, costs, and risks. Any potential conflicts of interest must be identified, disclosed, and managed appropriately. The decision should always be justifiable based on the client's best interests, with clear and thorough documentation to support the recommendation. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a junior analyst in the investment research department has received a direct request from a senior executive in a different division for detailed, non-public information regarding a specific company that Allianz SC is currently evaluating for a potential significant investment. The executive states the information is for strategic context and assures the analyst that it will be handled with discretion. Option A. Attempt to interpret the executive's request and provide a summary of publicly available information that might be relevant, without disclosing any non-public details. Option B. Ignore the request, assuming that if the information were truly necessary, the executive would have obtained it through official channels. Option C. Provide the requested information directly to the senior executive, relying on their assurance of discretion and the executive's seniority to justify the disclosure. Option D. Immediately consult with the Allianz SE Compliance Department or a designated ethics officer to seek guidance on how to proceed, ensuring all actions align with internal policies and regulatory requirements. Correct answer is D. Immediately consult with the Allianz SE Compliance Department or a designated ethics officer to seek guidance on how to proceed, ensuring all actions align with internal policies and regulatory requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the potential for that information to be misused or to create a conflict of interest. The employee is in a position of trust, and their actions must align with Allianz SE's ethical standards and regulatory obligations. The challenge lies in discerning when a request for information crosses the line from legitimate business inquiry to something that could compromise client confidentiality, market integrity, or internal policies. Careful judgment is required to avoid both oversharing and undersharing, ensuring that decisions are made transparently and with due consideration for all stakeholders. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves seeking guidance from the appropriate internal channels, such as the compliance department or a designated ethics officer. This is best professional practice because it leverages established procedures designed to handle such sensitive situations. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance by proactively addressing a potential issue rather than attempting to resolve it independently. This approach ensures that any decision made is informed by expert knowledge of Allianz SE's policies and relevant regulations, thereby mitigating risks of misconduct or breaches. It upholds the principle of accountability and transparency within the organization. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to directly provide the requested information without further inquiry. This fails to acknowledge the potential for misuse or conflict of interest and could lead to breaches of client confidentiality, insider trading regulations, or other compliance violations. It bypasses established risk assessment protocols and demonstrates a lack of due diligence. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the request entirely. While this might seem like a safe option, it can be detrimental to business operations and may be perceived as uncooperative or obstructive. More importantly, it fails to address the underlying need for information, which, if legitimate, should be handled through proper channels. It also misses an opportunity to clarify boundaries and educate the requesting party on appropriate information access. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to interpret the request and provide a partial answer based on personal judgment without consulting relevant policies or experts. This is risky because personal interpretation may be flawed, leading to inadvertent disclosure of sensitive information or a misrepresentation of facts. It bypasses the structured decision-making framework designed to ensure accuracy and compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should utilize a structured decision-making framework. First, identify the core issue and potential risks. Second, consult internal policies and procedures related to information sharing, confidentiality, and conflicts of interest. Third, if ambiguity exists or the situation involves sensitive data, escalate the matter to the appropriate internal authority, e.g., compliance, legal, or a supervisor. Fourth, document the request, the decision-making process, and the final outcome. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, compliant, and ethically sound, protecting both the individual and the organization. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates a recurring discrepancy in the reconciliation of a specific client portfolio's performance data against its benchmark. While the immediate impact on client reporting is minimal, the underlying cause remains unclear, and the team is under pressure to finalize quarterly performance reviews. A senior colleague suggests applying a standard adjustment based on how similar discrepancies were handled in previous quarters, stating it's a known issue that doesn't warrant a deep dive given the current workload. Option A. Investigate the root cause of the discrepancy thoroughly, consulting with the data management and compliance teams to understand the exact nature of the issue and its potential regulatory implications before proposing any adjustments. Option B. Escalate the issue to senior management immediately, requesting guidance on how to proceed without attempting any independent investigation or adjustment. Option C. Make an assumption about the cause of the discrepancy and implement a corrective action based on that assumption, prioritizing speed to meet the quarterly review deadline. Option D. Apply the standard adjustment suggested by the senior colleague, as it has been used successfully in the past to resolve similar reconciliation issues and will expedite the completion of the quarterly performance reviews. The correct answer is A. Investigate the root cause of the discrepancy thoroughly, consulting with the data management and compliance teams to understand the exact nature of the issue and its potential regulatory implications before proposing any adjustments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate operational efficiency and long-term regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The pressure to meet targets can lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly beneficial in the short term, expose the firm and its employees to significant risks. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that decisions are not only expedient but also robustly defensible under the relevant regulatory framework. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, evidence-based assessment of the situation before committing to a course of action. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible decision-making expected of financial professionals. By seeking clarification and understanding the root cause of the discrepancy, the individual demonstrates a commitment to accuracy and adherence to internal policies and external regulations. This proactive stance prevents potential misinterpretations or the implementation of flawed solutions that could lead to regulatory breaches or reputational damage. An incorrect approach that relies solely on anecdotal evidence or past practices without verification is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of regulatory requirements and internal controls. It risks perpetuating errors or implementing solutions that are no longer compliant, leading to potential breaches of Allianz SE's internal policies and relevant financial services regulations. Another incorrect approach that involves making an assumption without seeking confirmation is equally problematic. Assumptions, especially in a regulated environment, can lead to significant misjudgments and operational failures, potentially resulting in non-compliance with reporting standards or client service level agreements. Such actions demonstrate a lack of diligence and a disregard for established procedures, which are critical for maintaining the integrity of financial operations and client trust. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem. This involves gathering all relevant facts and data. Next, they should identify potential solutions and evaluate each against established policies, regulatory requirements, and ethical considerations. Seeking clarification from appropriate internal departments or supervisors is a crucial step when ambiguity exists. Finally, the chosen solution should be documented and its implementation monitored to ensure it achieves the desired outcome without compromising compliance or ethical standards. Question 12. During the evaluation of a new product offering, a team member suggests a marketing strategy that, while potentially effective in driving sales, skirts the edges of regulatory disclosure requirements. The team member argues that the approach has been used successfully in the past and that being overly cautious will hinder market penetration. How should a responsible professional proceed? Option A. Rely on the team member's assertion of past success and proceed with the marketing strategy, assuming that informal industry practices are sufficient guidance. Option B. Implement the marketing strategy as proposed, assuming past success indicates current compliance and that minor deviations from disclosure requirements are acceptable for competitive advantage. Option C. Postpone the decision on the marketing strategy indefinitely, citing the complexity of regulatory interpretation and the need for further undefined research. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed marketing strategy against all applicable regulations and internal compliance policies, seeking expert advice if any ambiguity exists, and prioritizing full disclosure and transparency. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed marketing strategy against all applicable regulations and internal compliance policies, seeking expert advice if any ambiguity exists, and prioritizing full disclosure and transparency. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate business pressures with long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. The temptation to prioritize short-term gains or avoid difficult conversations can lead to decisions that compromise integrity and potentially expose the firm to significant risks. The need for a robust decision-making framework is paramount to ensure that actions align with Allianz SE's values and the regulatory environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, principle-based decision-making process that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This means thoroughly understanding the implications of the proposed action, consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations, and seeking guidance when uncertainty exists. This approach upholds professional integrity, fosters trust with stakeholders, and mitigates legal and reputational risks, aligning with the principles of responsible business conduct expected within the financial services industry. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the action without sufficient due diligence, driven by the desire to meet targets or avoid conflict. This failure to adequately assess risks and consult relevant parties can lead to breaches of regulatory requirements, such as those pertaining to customer protection or market conduct. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a prioritization of personal or departmental objectives over the firm's broader responsibilities. Another incorrect approach is to defer the decision indefinitely or avoid taking any action due to complexity or fear of negative consequences. This inaction can be as detrimental as a hasty decision, as it allows potential risks to persist and may violate regulatory obligations to act with due care and diligence. It also signals a lack of leadership and accountability. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice or past practices without verifying their current applicability or regulatory compliance. This can lead to decisions based on outdated or inappropriate information, resulting in regulatory breaches and ethical lapses. It fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of regulations and best practices. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making framework that includes 1. Identifying the ethical and regulatory issues at play. 2. Gathering all relevant facts and understanding the potential consequences of each course of action. 3. Consulting internal policies, procedures, and relevant regulation. 4. Seeking advice from compliance, legal, or senior management when necessary. 5. Evaluating the options against ethical principles and regulatory requirements. 6. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen course of action. This structured approach ensures that decisions are well considered, defensible, and aligned with professional standards. Question 13. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a recently launched investment product may contain a technical flaw that could lead to minor, but potentially widespread, miscalculations in its performance reporting to clients. While the immediate financial impact on the company is estimated to be manageable if the issue is addressed internally, a full recall and remediation would incur significant upfront costs and require extensive customer communication. What is the most appropriate course of action for Allianz SC operating under UK regulations? Option A. Implement a limited recall that only addresses the most critical aspects of the flaw and communicate to stakeholders that the issue is being managed with minimal disruption. Option B. Immediately initiate a comprehensive product recall and remediation process, prioritizing customer protection and transparent communication, while concurrently assessing the full financial implications and developing a plan to manage them. Option C. Focus on developing a strategy to absorb the costs internally and seek to recover them through future product performance or by adjusting fees, without immediately informing customers of the potential flaw. Option D. Delay a full recall to conduct a more thorough investigation into the financial impact and explore cost-saving measures, while providing customers with a general disclaimer about potential reporting inaccuracies. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a comprehensive product recall and remediation process, prioritizing customer protection and transparent communication, while concurrently assessing the full financial implications and developing a plan to manage them. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to conflicting stakeholder interests and the potential for reputational damage. The decision-maker must balance the immediate financial implications of a product recall with the long-term trust and safety of customers. Navigating this requires a robust decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance over short-term gains. The pressure to minimize costs can be significant, making it crucial to adhere to established principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes customer safety and regulatory compliance, which are foundational ethical and legal obligations for any financial services firm. Allianz SC, operating within the UK regulatory framework, is bound by the principles of the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA. The FCA's principles for businesses particularly Principle 6, customers' interests, and Principle 7, communications with clients, mandate that firms act honestly, fairly, and professionally in accordance with the best interests of their clients. A proactive recall, even with associated costs, demonstrates a commitment to these principles, safeguards customer well-being, and mitigates the risk of more severe regulatory penalties and reputational harm that could arise from a delayed or inadequate response. This aligns with the broader ethical duty of care expected of financial institutions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to delay the recall to assess the full financial impact and explore cost-saving measures. This fails to uphold the duty of care to customers and violates FCA Principle 6. Such a delay could expose customers to further risk, leading to potential harm and significant regulatory sanctions for failing to act in their best interests. It also breaches Principle 7 by not communicating transparently and promptly about a material issue. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with a limited, less comprehensive recall that only addresses the most obvious issues, while downplaying the potential severity to stakeholders. This is ethically unsound and likely violates FCA principles regarding fair treatment and clear communication. It attempts to manage perception rather than address the root cause of the problem, which is a failure of professional integrity and could lead to further incidents and greater regulatory scrutiny. A third incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the financial cost of the recall and seek to pass these costs on to customers or other parties without a clear justification or regulatory basis. This demonstrates a disregard for customer interests and potentially breaches regulatory requirements concerning fair charges and transparency. It prioritizes financial recovery over ethical responsibility and customer protection, which is unacceptable under the FCA's regulatory regime. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that starts with identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests. Next, they must clearly define the problem and gather all necessary factual information, including potential risks and regulatory obligations. The framework should then involve evaluating potential courses of action against ethical principles, regulatory requirements such as FCA principles, and the company's values. A risk-based approach, prioritizing the mitigation of harm to customers and the integrity of the market, is essential. Finally, decisions should be documented, and communication should be transparent and timely with all affected parties. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that a senior manager has recently acquired a significant personal stake in a privately held company that provides specialized IT services to a competitor of Allianz SC. The manager has not disclosed this investment to their superiors or the compliance department. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the senior manager? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal investment and the potential conflict of interest to the compliance department and their direct superior, and offer to recuse themselves from any decisions or discussions involving the IT service provider or its competitor. Option B. Resell the shares in the competitor's IT service provider immediately to eliminate the conflict, without informing anyone at Allianz SC about the investment or the sale. Option C. Inform their direct superior verbally about the investment, but refrain from formal disclosure to the compliance department, believing that an informal conversation is sufficient to address the potential conflict. Option D. Continue with their current responsibilities, assuming the investment is immaterial and unlikely to influence their professional judgment, and wait to see if the issue is raised by the audit team again. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal investment and the potential conflict of interest to the compliance department and their direct superior, and offer to recuse themselves from any decisions or discussions involving the IT service provider or its competitor. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest arising from a senior manager's personal investment in a competitor firm. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a delicate balance between upholding ethical standards, adhering to regulatory requirements, and maintaining business operations. The senior manager's dual role as an employee and an investor creates a situation where their professional judgment could be compromised, potentially leading to decisions that benefit their personal interests over those of Allianz SC. Careful judgment is required to assess the severity of the conflict, determine the appropriate course of action, and ensure transparency and fairness. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the conflict to the relevant compliance department and senior management. This aligns with Allianz SE's internal policies and the broader regulatory framework governing financial institutions, which mandate disclosure of potential conflicts of interest to prevent insider trading, market manipulation, and other unethical practices. By proactively reporting the situation, the senior manager demonstrates integrity and allows the company to implement appropriate mitigation strategies, such as recusal from decision-making processes where the conflict is relevant. This approach upholds the principles of good corporate governance and fiduciary duty. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the conflict or downplay its significance. This failure to disclose is a direct violation of ethical codes of conduct and regulatory obligations. It creates an environment where decisions might be made based on personal gain rather than the best interests of the company and its stakeholders, potentially leading to reputational damage and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the investment or mislead investigators. This constitutes a serious breach of trust and can result in severe disciplinary action, including termination and potential legal penalties, as it undermines the integrity of the organization and its compliance framework. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. This typically involves 1. Identifying the potential conflict or ethical dilemma. 2. Gathering all relevant facts and understanding the scope of the issue. 3. Consulting internal policies, codes of conduct, and applicable regulations. 4. Seeking advice from compliance, legal, or HR departments. 5. Evaluating the potential risks and consequences of different courses of action. 6. Choosing the option that best upholds ethical principles, regulatory compliance, and the company's best interests. 7. Documenting the decision-making process and the chosen course of action. Question 15. Regulatory review indicates that a financial advisor at Allianz SE receives an unsolicited, anonymous tip via email suggesting a significant, undisclosed regulatory approval for a major pharmaceutical company is imminent, which would likely cause its stock price to surge. The advisor has no prior knowledge of this information, and the source of the email is untraceable. Option A. Refrain from trading and immediately report the tip, including the email, to the Allianz SE Compliance Department for investigation. Option B. Share the information with the client and advise them to consider trading based on this tip. Option C. Immediately execute trades on behalf of the client to capitalize on the anticipated stock price increase. Option D. Ignore the email as it is from an untraceable source and therefore not credible. The correct answer is C. Immediately execute trades on behalf of the client to capitalize on the anticipated stock price increase. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a financial advisor, acting on behalf of Allianz SE, receives a tip about a significant upcoming market event that could impact a client's portfolio. The challenge lies in balancing the fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest with the prohibition against insider trading. The advisor must navigate the fine line between utilizing legitimate market insights and exploiting non-public material information. The pressure to generate superior returns for the client, coupled with the potential for personal gain or reputational damage, complicates the decision-making process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach is to refrain from acting on the information and to report it through appropriate internal channels. This aligns with the principles of fair markets and regulatory compliance, specifically the prohibition against insider trading as defined by relevant financial conduct regulations. By not trading, the advisor upholds their ethical obligation to avoid conflicts of interest and to maintain the integrity of the financial markets. Reporting the information allows the compliance department to assess its materiality and take necessary actions, such as informing the market or investigating potential breaches. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency and adherence to the law, which is paramount for a reputable financial institution like Allianz SE. Incorrect approaches analysis. Acting on the tip to buy or sell securities based on the non-public information constitutes insider trading. This is a direct violation of securities laws and regulations, leading to severe penalties for both the individual and the firm. It erodes market confidence and is ethically reprehensible as it creates an unfair advantage over other market participants. Sharing the tip with the client without first verifying its legitimacy and materiality, or without understanding the regulatory implications, is also problematic. While seemingly acting in the client's interest, it risks facilitating insider trading by the client and exposes the advisor and Allianz SC to regulatory scrutiny and potential liability. It bypasses the firm's internal controls and compliance procedures designed to prevent such breaches. Ignoring the tip and taking no action, while avoiding direct insider trading, fails to address a potential market manipulation or a breach of confidentiality. A responsible professional has a duty to report suspicious information that could impact market integrity or client interests, even if they do not directly act on it. This passive approach neglects the broader ethical and regulatory responsibilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the financial services industry must adopt a robust decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This framework should involve 1. Information assessment. Critically evaluate the source and nature of any information received. Is it public? Is it material? Is it non-public? 2. Regulatory check. Understand and apply relevant laws and regulations concerning market conduct, insider trading, and client best interests. 3. Internal policy adherence. Follow the firm's established policies and procedures for handling sensitive information and potential conflicts of interest. 4. Consultation. Seek guidance from compliance or legal departments when in doubt. 5. Action and documentation. Take appropriate action based on the assessment and document all steps taken. Question 16. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential new business opportunity that involves a novel risk profile not explicitly covered by the current risk appetite statement. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the opportunity, assuming the existing risk appetite is broad enough to encompass this new type of risk, without further consultation. Option B. Seek a definitive approval or rejection from a single senior manager without involving other relevant departments. Option C. Reject the opportunity immediately as it falls outside the explicitly defined risk parameters of the current risk appetite statement. Option D. Consult with the risk management function and relevant senior management to assess the risk, discuss potential mitigation strategies, and determine if the opportunity aligns with the spirit of the risk appetite framework before making a decision. The correct answer is D. Consult with the risk management function and relevant senior management to assess the risk, discuss potential mitigation strategies, and determine if the opportunity aligns with the spirit of the risk appetite framework before making a decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance competing priorities, adhering to internal risk appetite statements and potentially missing a profitable business opportunity. The challenge lies in interpreting the nuances of the risk appetite framework and applying it to a novel situation where the risk is not explicitly defined but can be inferred. Careful judgment is required to avoid both excessive risk-taking and undue conservatism that could stifle business growth. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, multi-stakeholder consultation process. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that decisions are informed, transparent, and defensible. Specifically, it demonstrates adherence to the principles of sound governance and risk management, which are fundamental in regulated financial institutions like Allianz SC. By engaging with the risk management function and senior management, the individual ensures that the decision is not made in isolation, but reflects the collective understanding and acceptance of risk within the organization. This process also implicitly addresses regulatory expectations for robust internal controls and risk oversight. The decision to proceed, with appropriate mitigation, after thorough consultation, shows a commitment to both business objectives and risk management, a key tenet of responsible financial conduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately rejecting the opportunity due to the perceived novelty of the risk. This fails to acknowledge that risk appetite frameworks are designed to guide decision-making, not to be rigid barriers to all new ventures. It represents a failure of proactive risk management and a missed opportunity for business development, potentially contravening the implicit expectation that employees will seek to identify and manage new risks rather than simply avoid them. Ethically, it could be seen as a lack of initiative and a failure to act in the best interests of the company's growth. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the opportunity without any further consultation, assuming the existing risk appetite is sufficient. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established governance procedures and demonstrates a disregard for the risk management function's expertise and oversight responsibilities. Such an action could lead to unmanaged risks materializing, potentially causing financial loss and reputational damage, and would likely be viewed as a breach of internal policies and regulatory requirements for due diligence and risk assessment. A third incorrect approach is to seek a definitive yes or no answer from a single senior manager without a broader discussion. This is problematic because it centralizes decision-making inappropriately and may not capture the full spectrum of risk considerations or strategic implications. It can lead to decisions based on incomplete information or individual biases, rather than a holistic organizational perspective. This approach undermines the collaborative nature of effective risk management and can create a perception of favorability or lack of due process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should utilize a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the context, identifying stakeholders, assessing potential impacts, and consulting relevant expertise. In situations involving novel risks, this framework should include 1. Clearly defining the risk and its potential impact. 2. Reviewing the existing risk appetite statement for relevant guidance. 3. Consulting with the risk management department to understand their perspective and potential mitigation strategies. 4. Engaging with senior management to ensure alignment with strategic objectives and overall risk tolerance. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. This structured approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, compliant, and aligned with the organization's risk culture. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern in transaction volumes for a specific product line, exceeding a predefined threshold. This alert has been flagged for review. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response to ensure regulatory compliance and efficient risk management? Option A. Log the alert and wait for a pattern of similar alerts to emerge before taking any action. Option B. Immediately initiate a full impact assessment for potential regulatory breaches and operational disruptions. Option C. Escalate the alert directly to senior management for a decision on whether to investigate further. Option D. Conduct a preliminary review to contextualize the alert, cross-referencing with recent market events, internal operational changes, and other relevant data before deciding on the scope of further investigation. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate a full impact assessment for potential regulatory breaches and operational disruptions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how to interpret monitoring system outputs in the context of regulatory expectations for impact assessment. The core difficulty lies in distinguishing between a system alert that signifies a potential breach and one that is a false positive or requires further contextualization before triggering a full-scale impact assessment. Misinterpreting such alerts can lead to inefficient resource allocation, unnecessary regulatory scrutiny, or, conversely, a failure to identify and mitigate genuine risks, which could have significant financial and reputational consequences for Allianz SE. The correct approach involves a systematic, risk-based evaluation of the monitoring system's output. This means not immediately escalating every alert to a full impact assessment. Instead, it requires an initial phase of validation and contextualization. This involves cross-referencing the alert with other data sources, considering the magnitude and potential severity of the flagged issue, and assessing its relevance to regulatory requirements. This approach aligns with the principles of proportionality and efficiency often embedded in regulatory frameworks, which expect firms to have robust but also practical risk management systems. It demonstrates a mature understanding of risk appetite and the ability to differentiate between minor deviations and significant threats, thereby ensuring that resources are focused where they are most needed and that regulatory obligations are met without undue burden. An incorrect approach would be to trigger a full impact assessment for every single alert generated by the monitoring system, regardless of its nature or potential severity. This is professionally unacceptable because it represents a failure to exercise sound judgment and a lack of understanding of risk prioritization. It leads to wasted resources, potential alert fatigue, where genuine issues might be overlooked due to the sheer volume of assessments, and an inefficient use of compliance and operational teams. From a regulatory perspective, this approach could be seen as a failure to implement a risk-based approach, which is a fundamental expectation. It also fails to demonstrate an understanding of the principle of materiality, which is crucial in regulatory compliance. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss alerts without proper investigation, especially if they relate to sensitive areas like customer data or financial transactions. This is a direct contravention of regulatory expectations for due diligence and risk management. It suggests a disregard for potential risks and a failure to uphold the firm's duty of care. Such an approach could lead to significant regulatory penalties, legal liabilities, and severe reputational damage if a genuine issue is missed and results in harm to customers or the market. It demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and a reactive, potentially negligent, stance towards compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. 1. Understand the monitoring system's capabilities and limitations. 2. Establish clear thresholds and criteria for escalating alerts to impact assessments based on risk appetite and regulatory requirements. 3. Implement a tiered review process, starting with initial validation and contextualization before full impact assessment. 4. Ensure that personnel responsible for reviewing alerts are adequately trained and understand the potential implications of their decisions. 5. Maintain clear documentation of all alerts, reviews, and decisions made, which is crucial for audit and regulatory review. 6. Regularly review and update the alert management process based on performance, emerging risks, and regulatory changes. Question 18. Implementation of a new AI-driven customer service chatbot for Allianz SE's UK operations requires a thorough evaluation of its potential effects. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with regulatory expectations and ethical customer treatment? Option A. Deferring the comprehensive impact assessment until 6 months after the chatbot has been fully deployed to gather real-world usage data. Option B. Performing a high-level risk assessment focused solely on the financial implications of the chatbot's deployment, assuming customer adoption will be straightforward. Option C. Relying on the IT department's assurance that the chatbot's core functionality is secure and efficient, with a plan to address any customer complaints as they arise after launch. Option D. Conducting a detailed impact assessment that considers customer data privacy, potential biases in AI responses, operational integration challenges, and the tool's accessibility for all customer demographics, with findings informing iterative development and post-launch monitoring. The correct answer is D. Conducting a detailed impact assessment that considers customer data privacy, potential biases in AI responses, operational integration challenges, and the tool's accessibility for all customer demographics, with findings informing iterative development and post-launch monitoring. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid product development and the need for thorough impact assessment, particularly concerning regulatory compliance and customer protection. The pressure to innovate and gain market advantage can lead to shortcuts, potentially overlooking critical risks. Allianz SE, as a regulated financial institution, must balance these competing demands, ensuring that new product launches do not inadvertently expose the company or its customers to undue risk or violate established legal and ethical standards. The complexity arises from identifying all potential downstream effects of a new digital tool on various customer segments and internal processes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multi-stage, iterative impact assessment process that begins early in the development lifecycle and continues post-launch. This aligns with principles of responsible innovation and robust risk management, often mandated by regulatory frameworks like those governing financial services in the UK e.g. FCA's Principles for Businesses, CISC Handbook. A comprehensive assessment would involve identifying all relevant stakeholders, mapping potential impacts across operational, financial, reputational, and customer-centric dimensions, and establishing clear mitigation strategies. This proactive and systematic approach ensures that potential issues are identified and addressed before they materialize, thereby safeguarding customer interests and maintaining regulatory adherence. It demonstrates a commitment to embedding risk management and compliance into the product development DNA. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the development team's initial assessment of the tool's functionality. This fails to account for the diverse ways customers might interact with the tool, potential unintended consequences, or the broader systemic risks within the organization. It represents a significant regulatory failure by neglecting the duty of care owed to customers and the requirement for robust internal controls. Another incorrect approach is to defer the comprehensive impact assessment until after the tool has been launched. This is a reactive stance that violates the principle of proactive risk management and can lead to significant remediation costs, reputational damage, and regulatory sanctions. It demonstrates a disregard for the principles of good governance and customer protection. A third incorrect approach would be to focus only on the technical aspects of the tool, ignoring the human and operational elements. This overlooks critical areas such as data privacy, accessibility for all customer segments, and the potential for misuse, all of which are subject to regulatory scrutiny and ethical considerations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to impact assessment. This involves 1. Early engagement, involving compliance, legal risk, and customer experience teams from the outset of any new initiative. 2. Comprehensive scoping, clearly defining the boundaries of the assessment and identifying all potential areas of impact. 3. Stakeholder analysis, understanding the needs and potential vulnerabilities of all affected parties. 4. Scenario planning, considering a range of plausible scenarios, including adverse events. 5. Mitigation and monitoring, developing clear plans to address identified risks and establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and review. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, risks are managed effectively, and regulatory obligations are met. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows that a new regulatory directive has been issued, requiring enhanced data privacy measures for all client interactions. Considering the Allianz SE hiring assessment test jurisdiction, which of the following approaches best assesses the potential impact of this directive on Allianz SE's operations and client service delivery? Option A. Detailed analysis of how the new data privacy measures will necessitate changes in client onboarding processes, data storage protocols, and client communication channels, including an assessment of the training and technology investments required. Option B. An estimation of the direct financial cost of purchasing new software to manage client data without considering operational workflow adjustments or client-facing implications. Option C. A general statement confirming that Allianz SE will comply with the new data privacy directive by updating its internal policies. Option D. A summary of the regulatory directive's key provisions, assuming that existing operational procedures are sufficient for compliance. The correct answer is A. A detailed analysis of how the new data privacy measures will necessitate changes in client onboarding processes, data storage protocols, and client communication channels, including an assessment of the training and technology investments required. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how to assess the impact of a new regulatory requirement on Allianz SE's existing business operations and client services, specifically within the context of the Allianz SE hiring assessment test jurisdiction. The challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial understanding of the regulation to a practical, forward-looking assessment that considers both immediate compliance and long-term strategic implications. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine impacts and potential overreactions or underestimations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and comprehensive review of the new regulation's implications across all relevant business functions. This includes identifying specific operational changes needed, assessing potential client service disruptions, and evaluating the resource allocation required for implementation. This aligns with the principles of robust risk management and proactive compliance, ensuring that Allianz SE can adapt effectively to the evolving regulatory landscape without compromising its business objectives or client trust. Adhering to the specific regulatory framework of the exam's jurisdiction is paramount, ensuring that all assessments are grounded in applicable law and guidance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate, quantifiable costs of compliance, without considering the qualitative impacts on client relationships or the potential for operational inefficiencies, fails to provide a holistic view. This can lead to under-resourcing of critical compliance activities or a misallocation of resources, potentially resulting in future breaches or a decline in service quality. Another incorrect approach might involve a broad, unspecific statement of compliance without detailing the actual steps or resources required, which lacks the actionable insight needed for effective implementation and oversight. This demonstrates a failure to translate regulatory requirements into concrete business actions, potentially leading to noncompliance due to a lack of preparedness. A third incorrect approach might be to dismiss the impact as negligible without a thorough analysis, which is a direct contravention of the duty of care and due diligence expected under regulatory frameworks, risking significant penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory text and its stated objectives. This should be followed by a cross-functional impact analysis, engaging with relevant departments, e.g., legal, compliance, operations, client services, to gather diverse perspectives. The assessment should then prioritize identified impacts based on their severity and likelihood, leading to the development of a detailed action plan with clear timelines, responsibilities, and resource requirements. Regular review and adaptation of this plan are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and to address any unforeseen consequences. Question 20. The control framework reveals a new regulatory directive from the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, concerning enhanced data privacy for customer information. Which approach to assessing the impact of this directive on Allianz SC's current operational procedures and control environment best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations under UK law? Option A. Rely on the interpretation of a single compliance officer to determine the scope of impact, without broader consultation, and proceed with changes based on their singular understanding. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment involving all relevant business units, IT departments, and compliance teams to identify all affected processes, systems, and data flows, and to evaluate potential risks and necessary control enhancements. Option C. Focus the assessment solely on the direct costs of implementing new technology, without considering the broader implications for data handling procedures, staff training, or potential changes to customer-facing interactions. Option D. Conduct a high-level review of the new directive's core requirements and implement immediate, minimal changes to address only the most explicit mandates, assuming existing controls are largely sufficient. The correct answer is D. Conduct a high-level review of the new directive's core requirements and implement immediate, minimal changes to address only the most explicit mandates, assuming existing controls are largely sufficient. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of how to assess the impact of a new regulatory requirement on existing business processes and controls within Allianz SC, specifically adhering to the UK regulatory framework and SISI guidelines. The challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial understanding of the regulation to a practical, forward-looking assessment that identifies potential vulnerabilities and necessary adjustments. Careful judgment is required to balance compliance needs with operational efficiency and business objectives. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a proactive and comprehensive impact assessment. This includes identifying all affected business units, processes, and systems, and then evaluating the potential consequences of non-compliance or inadequate implementation. It necessitates engaging with relevant stakeholders to gather information and validate findings, ensuring that the assessment is grounded in operational reality. This aligns with the SISI emphasis on professional integrity and the regulatory expectation under UK law for firms to maintain robust risk management frameworks and to be able to demonstrate compliance with applicable regulations. A thorough impact assessment ensures that Allianz SC can implement necessary changes effectively and efficiently, mitigating potential risks and avoiding regulatory sanctions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate, direct requirements of the new regulation without considering downstream effects or interdependencies would be a regulatory failure. This is because it neglects the broader operational context and could lead to unforeseen compliance gaps or operational disruptions. Another incorrect approach that relies on assumptions or anecdotal evidence without proper validation would also be a failure, as it undermines the reliability of the assessment and the subsequent implementation plan. This lacks the due diligence expected under UK financial services regulation, which demands evidence-based decision-making and robust risk assessment. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness, leading to a superficial review, would fail to identify critical control weaknesses. thereby exposing Allianz SE to regulatory scrutiny and potential breaches of its duty of care to clients and the market. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understanding the new regulatory requirement and its stated objectives. Second, mapping out all potentially affected areas within the organization. Third, conducting a detailed impact analysis, considering both direct and indirect consequences. Fourth, consulting with subject matter experts and relevant business units to refine the assessment. Fifth, developing a clear action plan with timelines and responsibilities. Finally, establishing a mechanism for ongoing monitoring and review to ensure sustained compliance. This systematic process ensures that all relevant factors are considered, leading to informed and effective decision-making.